Steve Glover has an impressive resume. He won't like me saying that. We've been friends for quite a long time. In fact, we're related, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. That doesn't make you a bit better, but we've been, my wife and I, we've been a whole bunch of family history, and I ramble on. And take a look when you're in the afterwards in the vestry. Take a look at an amazing piece of writing that Steve put together of letters that his great uncle Winfred or Fred Glover sent home to his mother, and unfortunately so many others. He didn't come back, and the really neat thing in various letters, people mention, one case he mentioned Harold Harris. Of course, they were next door neighbors, and one of the letters somewhere I heard someone said he had talked to so-and-so, knew old Rod or someone, and he's okay too. So a lot of mothers must have thought like that. So anyway, Steve Glover is a self-styled world-renowned historian and has spoken at legions all over and has made a real hobby of putting together history of the men who fought for king and country in the Great War. Steve?
Thank you. My name is Steve Glover. I am not an historian, except that I should have been. I should have gone to pay more attention when I was in high school and university. Wow. And I could have been a history teacher, but no, that C+ at the university didn't do it for me. Next time for sure. Okay. Try to keep you awake here, but thank you, Grant, and for asking me to speak about the Great War. It was a few years back when I was researching my genealogy that I learned about my great-uncle Fred, who died in the Great War, and I did a bit of a tribute to him, came out and I showed it to Grant and a few others, and they said, that's great. Got more of the story about Madoc, and I felt entitled, or I should feel that I needed to get entitled to do a little bit more research about what happened here in Madoc. But the Great War, as everyone knows, and these are statistics that are right out of the Veterans Affairs book that came out on the, I believe it was the 60th anniversary back in 1977. These are the stats. Almost over 600,000 men and women served in the Great War out of a population of just 8 million people. That's roughly about 1 out of every 8 or so. Almost 67,000 were killed. When you think about World War II, and that was a terrible war, I believe there was something in the order of about 42,000 were killed. Another 173,000 wounded. So essentially what you have is 1 out of every 3 of those that served over that 4-year period of the war were casualties. And the reputation, everybody, I think, is aware when you have your Canadian history classes way back when, that Canada stood tall. We were part of the British Expeditionary Force, but we fought as a corps, as a Canadian corps. And as such, there were situations where we held the ground and we gained a great reputation, to the point where in the peace conference in 1919, we were asked to be a signator on that as part of it. By the way, there were some people that thought we shouldn't, the Americans, but they only joined the war in 1917 and just more or less showed up in 1918. So we'd already put these kinds of numbers together, which were a terrible loss for our nation, and we deserve to be there as signatories. From Bell, remember, they talk about the battles that we were involved in. The war began in August of 1914, but it takes a while for you to get your soldiers together, because we didn't really have a standing army. We had militias, but we needed to get trained, and as such, the British, who had a standing army, they took the field in 1914. And when the Canadians showed up, the 1st Division over in England in the fall of 1914, it was determined that they needed some more training before they could go into battle. So it wasn't until April, May of 1915 that we finally see Canadian troops fighting in France and in Belgium, which was the Western Front. Talk about the first battle that essentially the Canadians fought as a division. We weren't a corps at this point, we were a single division. And that was the second battle of Ypres in April and May of 1915. This is an artist's depiction. I don't recall the name of the artist, but this is courtesy of the Archives Canada, that depicts a scene during the battle. The second battle of Ypres was the first time that the enemy used gas. And it was April 24, when this cloud of chlorine gas started to come across the fields, and in direct opposite of those trenches were the French. And the French didn't know what was happening. And next thing you know, they start to gasp. A tremendous amount of firing goes on, and then suddenly the guns start to pop only on a few occasions. Many of the men ran. They were afraid for their lives. They were choking. They could not breathe. The Canadians were next beside them. They saw the gas coming. They weren't in the direct lines as the gas was seeping across, but they got the remnants of the gas. And as some of you might know, some of the officers who recognized what they could see in the air, those that were studying science and paid attention to Mr. Moorcroft's class, recognized that this was a gas, and they determined it was chlorine, and they suggested to the guys that if they wanted to survive, they should pee into their handkerchiefs and put it over their mouths. And many of the men saved their lives because of that. But this was a huge battle that went on for at least a couple of weeks, and at the end run, out of 12,000 infantry, in total I think it was 18,000 men, that artillery and infantry, out of 12,000 infantry, we lost half of our men. Terrible. Imagine what it was like back here in Canada, that the news would start to sift in, and you would start to see the war dead in the newspapers. And suddenly all that brave, we're gonna do something here. We're Canada, you know, where do we get over there? And suddenly you say, oh, you know, this is terrible. This isn't good. In fact, in the North Hastings Review, the newspaper of the time, we start to see letters published after the Second Battle of Ypres. And here we have a letter from Peter Conley, who's a private in the 1st Canadian Contingent, and he writes to a friend, Mrs. Thompson. I wonder if that's Hazel Thompson's relative, one of my other teachers. Well, dear friend, this war is a very bad one, I can tell you. No one knows but those that are in it. I feel properly broken up. Here we have a letter from a relative, our Thomas Broad, who was, I believe, a cousin of Robert Newell Broad, whose letter to his wife and his son talks about the battle at Ypres. If hell is any worse than what we've come through the last 20 days, I never want to get there. You will see by the paper the battle we were in near, and that was blanked out by the censors, and that was Ypres. He goes on to say, we were in the trenches 20 days under shell fire, the whole time. It was nothing but shrapnel shells and other big explosives, shells dropping on us all the time. Still, the Germans were not satisfied with all that. They turned that awful deadly gas on us, which I guess you'll see in the paper what it was. But remember, they couldn't move us an inch. And we get the praise of saving the situation around here. Now, my dear wife, don't be a bit uneasy. I'm okay. And for a cool $11.90 a week, you can be part of this scene. And then at the Madoc Garden, it's just recently built, a couple of years previous to that, we have a speaker who goes and talks. It's a recruiting drive, He gave a shoulder-to-shoulder talk to the men of Madoc and surrounding. He said there's only two possible reasons why you won't enlist. You either can't or you won't. Then he told them, go home and take paper and pencil and write out your reasons why you don't want to fight. And see if you can show that to your best friend. Then he got down from the stage and he went up to any man in the crowd that looked like he was old enough to fight and said, how about you? Will you enlist? What do you do? Yes, sir, I will enlist. Because you're afraid to do anything else. That's pretty powerful. But that's the way you have to do it when you lose half your men in one battle. So my great uncle Fred Glover, pictured over on the right-hand side just prior to the war, a teacher up here in Elsevier and Madoc Township, joined up. There he is, the back on the right-hand side with his two other brothers, John Glover, who was a ministered here at some points, George Glover, my grandfather Phil Glover on the right-hand side, and that picture was taken around the time that Phil was getting married. And then for those of you that know little Willie Glover or Bill Glover, there he is on the left-hand side, the little boy. And those of you that know Florence Love, that's her over there. That's enough of telling you all about the Glovers. Like every soldier, they wrote out attestation papers, and you can't see them from here, but essentially it tells about your religion, who to contact, should they need to contact somebody, and then your height, your color of your eyes, etc., and then you sign off on the form. And unfortunately, Fred didn't make it through the war. He was killed at the Battle of Arras on August 26th. So that's a picture of him in the 155th Battalion. He was a sergeant. Because I guess he was a teacher, they figured he would get some people paying attention to him. There he is over on the right-hand side later during the war. He did again become a sergeant by the end of the war. He was a member of the 21st Battalion, and I have a bit of a logo over there that would show what his badge looked like. So onward, 1915. That's end. And by the way, all wars during that time in the trench warfare, at least I understood when the cold weather down, you don't fight anymore, or at least you take a bit of a break. Snipers, yes, every once in a while, a few bombs of some shells, but none of this, let's go at it. So end of November, you stop, you pick it up again in the spring. The 1916 campaign, two of the biggest battles were the Battle of the Somme, that the British were heavily involved with. And then you have the French offensive at Verdun, France. And oh my, look at the numbers. On the first day of July, the first day of battle, in the Battle of the Somme, 57,000 casualties, including the Royal Newfoundland Regiment that was wiped out. The Canadians were spared the Battle of the Somme for a period of time, but eventually they caught up to them as well and said, you can come into this war in the September through November timeframe, 24,000 casualties. Amazing. Because at this point in time, likely Canada had something like 80,000 troops, infantry and artillery, excuse me. So here's 24,000 casualties. So war call, come out please, more volunteers please, we need more. The start of what you see, and these are some of the names you'll see on the Madoc cenotaph in terms of killed in action. George Sager. Are there any Sagers in this crowd? I know that name's a big name around here, or used to be. James Sanford. A couple of guys in the early part of 1916, before really the Battle of Somme gets going. And then the Battle of the Somme. Killed in action, September through November, Private John Feeney, Private James Keller, Private George Kent, Elvin Morse Parks, Frank Kinlock, John Blair, Leslie Nichol. Here we have a picture of Frank Kinloch taken from the North Hastings Review from 1917, a laborer. He enlisted with the 39th Battalion, and he was born in 1893 here in Madoc. Here we have a picture of Leslie Nichol, who was a student. He died at 20, and he was killed in the Battle of the Somme. This picture is taken from the Virtual War Memorial on the internet. And if you go to that site, I would say out of 100 and almost 20,000 soldiers that are on there, I would say less than 5% have a picture. And I think it's time we talk about paramedics about pictures. Terry Pigman already paid tribute to Robert Noel Broad. Ken Broad sent me this information here, as well as the pictorial that shows a picture of Mr. Broad. He was wounded with a gunshot wound during the Battle of the Somme. I have the date of September 4. I'm not sure if that's what you have as well. I see that he was awarded a military medal. I could be wrong about the date, but it was the 2nd Canadian Machine Gun Corps. And if that ain't enough, he gets wounded again near the end of the war on September 4th, 1918. By this point, he gets the Military Cross. The military medal for bravery is given to NCOs and privates. The Military Cross is given to those that are officers. And not only bullets kill, but pneumonia kills. And here's a picture of Gunner Fred Miller, who was artillery. And this picture again from the North Hastings Review, the newspaper of the time. He was a ticket clerk with the GTR. Anybody know what the GTR? Grand Trunk. Yes, sir. That's right. Grand Trunk Railway. That used to be a group in the 70s. This is a postcard that was sent by my great uncle Fred. On the other side there was some writing, but this was sent at Christmas time, or I believe at Christmas time. But just the fact that they were training in the Berryfield camp in Kingston. All right.
Percy was his name.
All right. Thank you.
There were 3 brothers, Fred, Clifford, and Percy, and they were born and lived on Public School Road, right across from where Bob Curtis started.
Excellent. Good. I'm here all week. Already Terry paid tribute to Arthur Pigden. Grant had sent me his picture some time ago, so there's a picture of Mr. Pigden. He did join up with the 80th Battalion, and as it says here, he was a farmer, and he was shot at Denby Ridge through the right thigh, and he was awarded the military medal. Again, the dates might be off a little bit from what Terry identified, I'm not exactly sure, but he was promoted to sergeant at the end of the war, November 30th, and Terry did tell us quite a bit about him. After Vimy, something that you don't hear too often, but it's called the Battle of the Scarp, which I think was essentially the area in and around Vimy, just beyond Vimy. And a number of Canadians were killed in this action. Here we have Private Edward West, Private Philip Rogers, Joseph Cartwright. A very bad day on May the 9th for Madoc. John Alexander, Richard Henry Newland, and Harold Harris, or Harold Burnside Harris, Fred Glover's best friend. And where's Harold Harris? And family here from the Harris family today. And I was fortunate from Harold to be able to get a picture of Harold. May the 10th, Private Murray Lemon. Age 40. What's wrong with these older people? This is the picture that the Harris family gave me of Harold. And you can see here, he was a bookkeeper. He joined up just around the same time as Fred Glover did, and about the same time as Clifford Gunn as well. And He was a sergeant in this picture as part of the 155th Battalion. When you went overseas, when you suddenly were put in with seasoned veterans, all of the guys who were sergeant or corporals reverted to privates. There was no use in pretending that you could boss around guys that had been through the song. So he reverted to private. Unfortunately, while he did make it through Vimy, he was killed and his body was never found. And so his name is on the Vimy Ridge Monument, but he doesn't have the new grave. One of the battles that was fought after that the first time when Arthur Currie was in charge was the battle called Hill 70. You think of like, well, that's not a great name. Well, it was a heck of a battle. And the Canadians did it by themselves. Again, something like in the order of like 7,000 casualties. It was huge. But here we lose Lance Sergeant Lauren Bassett and a gentleman named Sergeant John Burns. And I apologize, but there was a gentleman named Bronson. Was it John?
John Alexander McDonald.
And the next time I present this, I will have his name up here, and hopefully we'll find a picture of this man as well, as a relative here from the Bronson family. Wounded, David Blakely and Private Leonard Cannon, who was a British homeboy. It's amazing the number of homeboys, or Bernardo children as they call them, that joined them. Quite the stories on the homeboys. I've heard the story on numerous occasions about what it was like for them. Here we have a picture of John Burns from the Canadian Virtual Memorial. Handsome lad, born in Madoc. He was a teacher as well, and as I said, killed in the battle for Hill 70. Passchendaele, perhaps the dirtiest battle in the mud of Flanders. Back to the Ypres area in October, November of 1917 for the Canadians. The British had started fighting in July, and there were cries for the heads of the military and the British, because the slaughter was going on, and the Prime Minister at the time, David Lloyd George, was just furious at the loss of men. And the Germans had the defensive positions again. They had the three ridges, and you know, here are these poor guys in mud. They can't move. It's been raining since the beginning of July, and they're dying by the thousands. So Douglas Hay turns to Currie and says, "I need you. I want you to come in here. We need you to help in this battle." And Currie says, "No." He says, "No." He says, "Because I'll lose 16,000 men if I take on this battle." He was told, "You have an order. You have to face the order." And he was right. He lost just under 16,000 casualties. He killed in action from the Madoc area: Arthur West, Alfred Gordon, George Van Cleet, Robert Nickel. I'm not sure if he's a brother or Leslie, but he's the Nickel family. A gunner, artillery, Percy Broadworth, James Doughty, and I heard somebody mention that there was a relative that married into the Doughty family here. Frank General, wounded Private James Willis, and Peter Kemp. I have a picture of John Nickel, again from the Canadian Virtual Memorial. He fought with the 21st Battalion as well. He was a farmer, Madoc Township boy, joined the 254th Battalion, the one that we mentioned that happened after the 155th. Killed at Passchendaele, not sure of the date. Don't believe they ever found his body. Here's a picture of Alfred Gordon, or Edward Gordon, not sure, from the 4th Canadian Mounted Rifles. He enlisted twice, and I haven't figured this one out, but somehow he enlists on, it says his date of birth is 1894, and then next time he enlists, he says it's 1893. I guess he wasn't good at math, but he was age 24 in 1917 when he's killed at Passchendaele.
Yes, you're talking about 1917, and the conscription act was passed in 1917?
It was.
Yes, and Why? Because they're in such need of it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and a lot of politics too, but.
I just found the green envelope.
Yeah.
And the paper system strips and that.
Yeah.
But I never knew that he was in there. Was
Yeah,
that-
yeah, the conscription happened in the fall of 1917, and some of those that were conscripted did show up in the later part of 1918 and fought for Canada. That's right.
Was there shame because you were conscripted?
I don't know if there was shame. There was some recognition of what needed to happen. A lot of people had essential work to do out here, especially in the rural areas. So, but I think that what happened was that essentially, you know, because of the lack or the need, eventually they said we need more troops, and so conscription happened. And it's a broad topic. I'd rather not beat it up too bad another time. Back to the North Hastings Review, we have Alfred Gordon's letters home, and I know it's difficult to read, but on August 29th he's writing to his parents, and he says, "Many a prayer has come from my heart, especially while in the trenches or under shell fire. It will bring a prayer to the lips of many people." Then he writes again a week before he's killed, "Your mother and father," just a line to answer your letter, "every day brings our time of return nearer, and it will come someday." And unfortunately, on the 26th of October, he's killed. And here's the letter that his wife received, and it was published in the North Hastings Review from the colonel, the officer commanding from his unit, identifying that Alfred Gordon was killed. So 1917, it's winter now, and again, everyone goes to sleep more or less, sniping, you're in the trenches, you're out of the trenches, you're back in the trenches, but you keep your head down. And then the spring occurs, and we have the revolution in France, the communist revolution in 1917, and Russia sues for peace, and suddenly we don't have an Eastern Front anymore, where the Germans were, you know, kept involved with the Russians as well as the Austro-Hungarians fighting the Russians of the time. And now Germany, realizing that America's joined the war, it's time to hit and hit hard in the spring. And let's not let something happen. The Canadian Corps with General Arthur Currie loses the 2nd Division, and that's the boys from the 155th and the 21st Battalion. They're taken away from Currie, given over to the British, and they catch the German offensive known as Michael in the fall of that time. And so we lose, and these names are all from the cenotaph: Private Leonard Carman, Herbert Phillips, Robert Alexander, wounded Robert Earl Burnside. I know Kathy Fleming gave me some pictures, Kathy somewhere, there Kathy, of Earl, Christopher Burkett, and Sergeant Carl or Buster Whiteout. I hope I pronounced it right. Thank you very much. Here's a picture of Earl. Thank you, Kathy, for this. He enlisted about the same time as Harold Harris and Fred Glover. He was a teacher as well. And while he wasn't with the 21st Battalion for too long, was brought in on March of 1918. A month, in that same month, he was wounded the left side of the neck, and I do believe he had another wound as well. Standing by the graves back in 2002 when I toured my great uncle Fred's grave at Artillery. Thank you very much for your time.